Hi there, I'm Kelly, and I'd like to share with you a recent project of mine that's been receiving quite a bit of interest, my revamp of a glass outdoor table. I really wanted an outdoor setting for my family to enjoy the lovely summer days and nights we have in Melbourne, Australia. Unfortunately, many of the outdoor settings I looked at were way out of my budget, so I started exploring options on Facebook Marketplace, and that's where I found this 10-seater outdoor setting, and luckily for me, was able to purchase for only $50. Yes, it needed work, but from the moment I saw it, I had a vision of what I wanted it to eventually look like. This table was in for a serious revamp. I think it's important to note that both my hubby and I love to repurpose items. We often feel that way too many things end up in landfill. Just because it's old doesn't necessarily mean we have to throw it away. But even still, my hubby looked at my table project with serious concern in his eys. Once I had the glass cleaned up, I enlisted the services of my eldest son Chris to assist with pulling the table apart. I needed the glass to be separated. My grand plan was to stencil the underside of the glass, which required the glass to be separated from the table rim. The glass was positioned inside the house on top of my children's pool table with a tarp underneath and the bottom of the glass facing up. I needed to prep the glass so that when applying the stenciling with acrylic paint, the paint would bond to the glass. Of course, the importance of stenciling the underside of the glass was to ensure it didn't get scratched off as well. But to prep the glass, I applied ESP over the entire glass, wiped it down per the instructions, and I actually left it for a day, although the instructions stated you could start working on the glass after an hour. For my tabletop design, I purchased a stencil from my stencil lady here in Australia. They have a fabulous amount of amazing stencils to choose from, by the way. And the stencil I ordered was number 1002 in an extra large. Remembering, it's a 10-seater outdoor setting. Now came the big task, applying the stenciling to the glass top. To get started, I decided to make sure I balanced the design by actually centralizing the first stencil. I had my son assist in the positioning and well, oops, the stencil was slightly out, but hey, I decided that it added to the character of the table. On that stencil, I actually applied 3 coats of acrylic antique white satin finish paint with a stencil brush. Obviously dabbing the paint on to get the coverage I desired. You could speed this process up by using a foam roller. As a novice stenciler, I realized this too late, but also as a special note, being my first stenciling project, I had seen many stencilers recommending to remove the stencil when the paint had dried. I didn't actually do this. I removed it once I applied the 3rd coat because I found trying to remove once all the coats of paint had dried actually lifted the paint, and I did actually test this technique out before starting to apply it to the table just on a garden pot. The garden pot survived as well, and obviously things worked out well on the glass top table. I continued down the middle of the table till I'd filled out the stencil as far as I could go in the middle strip. The table had now obtained the nickname from the family of the doily. They had no idea at this stage just how big the doily was going to get. Just as a particular note, I was extremely diligent with placing each next stencil to ensure I didn't have any gaps or any blank lines between the stencils. For each stencil, I did use masking tape on the edges of the stencil to hold it in place. I then applied 3 coats of acrylic paint, removed the tape, removed the stencil, then cleaned my brush and washed the stencil. I did this for each stencil. The whole process ended up taking about 1 hour for each stencil that I applied. On the 2 outer strips, I also used black acrylic paint to add some extra dimension to the table. The black also required to be applied 3 times to get the coverage I wanted. And then finally, the glass stenciling was complete. To say I was hugely relieved was an understatement. Special note here, my research on working with acrylic paint is that it does take 30 days to cure fully. So the next leg of this project began while the paint cured, which of course was the painting of the table stand. And so this is where the project took some twists and turns, and it's where my hubby came to the rescue. Quite a few lessons learnt for me here. Firstly, the table stand is powder coated, but due to its age, the table had corrosion under the powder coating, and if I just left it, it would only be a matter of time before my table deteriorated. The corrosion, by the way, is easily identified where you see rough bubbling under the powder coating. My sanding with just sandpaper by hand didn't cut it. Hubby went in with the electric sander. That didn't cut it either due to the amount of corrosion. So he called in the big guns, paint stripper. Special note here, I did go to Bunnings and first bought an environmentally friendly paint stripper, which did absolutely nothing due to the powder coating. Hubby told me to get this one, and finally we got really good results. In my planning for the painting of the table stand, I had seen and heard on Facebook many people just raving about this Rust-Oleum spray paint. So I went and purchased 4 cans of the pewter hammered metal finish, as this is the look I wanted versus the original dark powder coated grey. But now I had another issue. The paint was great, colour was great, but there was so much paint wastage. Unfortunately, the design of the spray nozzle doesn't allow for it to be adjusted, so you've got so much overspray, it's ridiculous. To continue down this road would have cost a fortune. Lucky for me, hubby again came to my rescue and went and purchased a can of enamel paint from Dulux with the hammered pewter colour I wanted, and he used his gravity-fed spray gun to finally paint my table stand without bankrupting me. After allowing the table stand to cure for a week, the exciting part began of putting the table back together again. I was absolutely thrilled. Hubby had the look of glad this was about to be over, but I really am so thankful for his help to get it to this stage. The doily was about to take centre stage in our alfresco area. We did discover the value also of taking the photos of underneath the table prior to dismantling. It truly was our guide for putting the table back together again. Just simple things like, you know, did the clip go upside down? Where did that screw go? And etc. We also, of course, well, I did clean all the screws, etc. to make sure everything was spick and span. Thanks for watching. I certainly hope you enjoyed and got some good advice along the way. I personally love my boho table, and more importantly, I'm looking forward to so many family gatherings to be shared around this special table. Cheers for now.